Have you ever wondered what you should be doing with your excess capital and you want to invest, but you're not really sure how? Maybe you want to get into real estate and you're just overwhelmed by how to start. If that's you, this episode was made just for you. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kristyn. I'm an authorized infinite banking practitioner. I help Canadian families and business owners reclaim control of their money, find financial peace, and live the abundant life that they were born to live by keeping more of their hard earned dollars working for them. So today I wanted to bring on someone who was introduced to me through a mutual friend. His name is Mike Wolf, and he is a real estate professional, and he helps Canadian and American families get into real estate by providing them with a turnkey solution. So without further ado, welcome, Mike. So nice to have you. I'm so excited to have this conversation. We were introduced through our mutual friend Austin, and I was talking with him, and he mentioned that you are just the guy. You're not just the way that you invest in real estate and you're so good at what you do, but also that you have such a big heart and you really use your money in the way that you use your time to benefit humanity, really. Like he didn't have
Wow.
enough good things to say
I
about you.
have a lot
So
to live up to. I better do a good job on this interview, but thank you for that. And thank you, Austin, if you're watching this. Thanks. I appreciate the kind words. So,
awesome. So do you want to maybe let's start with what you do. So what exactly, I know you're a real estate guru. What exactly do you do in that realm?
yeah, so I don't know if I use the word guru, but in any case, I've been investing for 38 years. I used to invest strictly in Calgary, where I'm from. But then over time, I realized how much more sense it makes to invest in the US, both in terms of the prices, the return on investment, the laws, and depending on what state, are much more favorable than most of Canada. And so I've been doing it for many years. Probably the first half of my career, I was just doing it for myself. And then it's kind of funny because I'm when I first started, I was 23, and everybody said you're not gonna make it. It's a dog eat dog business. You're not gonna like everybody was telling me how I was gonna fail. And the best way to get me to succeed is to tell me I'm going to fail, because then I'm going to show you're wrong. So anyway, the interesting thing is over the years, a lot of the people that told me I wasn't going to make it became some of my best clients. And a lot of them would come to me. It's like, hey, I want to learn how you did that. And so I went from just doing it for myself to eventually teaching people, but more importantly, helping people actually do it, because there's a lot of challenges to becoming an expert in this field. And when you make mistakes, they're very, very expensive. So in a lot of cases, I actually do the work for them. And over the years, I developed a company that creates turnkey rental properties, which means that I've already bought the properties, fixed them up, put the tenants in place, have it professionally managed by my teams. And so it's great for people that don't even want to become investors. They don't want to be on the front lines. They don't want to be, learning how to find the deals and do all the day to day that's involved in being in the trenches. So that's how Austin found me, because he was looking to do some of that, and it really works well because, like I said, it is a really big learning curve. So this takes all that out of the equation.
Mm. I love that. I've had conversations with different people that teach people how to read the market, how to know where to invest, how to know how to do all this. So they teach them all of this background work, but I love that you kind of do it for them and take away, because for me that's very intimidating.
Well, it's also challenging. It's challenging enough in this business when you're working in the city that you actually live in. So, when I used to only do Calgary, it was still a challenge to get contractors to show up. That they when they're hungry, they show up, and then as soon as they get their paycheck, then they disappear. Anyway, there's a lot of challenges in this industry doing it locally. So even if I showed somebody, said, hey, here's how you go select a market, here's how you build a team, it's very, very difficult. And it's very challenging, especially if you're just starting out. You just want to do, start out with one property. Because for example, imagine, okay, you manage to find a good deal somewhere in the States. And now you go and you call up a contractor. The contractor doesn't want to deal with you if you only have one property. They want to deal with somebody like me who's got numerous properties. And so really what I do solves a lot of problems for a lot of people that want to get in. Because number one, if I'm buying 20 or 30 homes at a time and fixing them up, then not only do contractors want to work for me, but they're going to give me their best deal because they want the business. And if I go buy carpet, I'm not going and buying one piece of carpet for each house. I'm buying thousands of yards of carpet. And so at the end of the day, my costs are much lower than somebody who is doing one property would be. So they don't have to do all that work, and yet they get better, more steady returns, and they don't have to worry about the most challenging thing is really building a good team. And like I said, when you're just trying to do one property, nobody really wants to work for you anyway. And so it's just even more challenging.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of what I've heard over and over and over again in this space is it's all about the relationships that you build. It's all about really, your relationship with your realtor and your lawyers and all of
So
the people
important.
that work in the background, your contractors and your providers, all of those, the management companies, all of that. And when it's just you, again, that's where for me that feels really overwhelming because how do I know that this person's trustworthy?
Exactly.
You
And
don't know.
yeah, no, and over the years, I've seen so many scams, and especially if, people know that you're not living, you're out of state, you're out of country, even worse, you're out of country. And so anyway, I've seen just about every scam in the book, and we could do a whole episode on that easily. I'm not going to do that because it's going to scare people. But in any case, once again, when you're doing volume, and like for me, if I'm going to go build a team, I'm actually flying down there. I am meeting with lots and lots of people. I'm talking to other investors. And so I'm not just picking people. I was going to say yellow pages. That really dates me. I'm not just Googling and picking random people and hoping that they gel and work well together. I'm actually going down there and supervising it for the first little bit until it's cohesive. So there's just a lot of moving parts to it. And even when I first started, I had a lot of experience in Canada. When I first started in the US, I faced a lot of challenges myself as I learned the process. And now the good thing is I get to not only help people with the properties, but I also get to help them with all the stuff they need to do in addition to that, like setting up the right type of corporations so they don't get double taxed and converting currency and moving it back and forth. And these are things that I didn't know when I first started. So I had to make myself the guinea pig. And then over time, as I learned what not to do, then I was able to now coach people on what to do to not give the government all their money, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah, it goes back to that classic mentorship conversation that you know what? I love learning from mentors. Everyone should be a mentor. Everyone should be learning from mentors. I don't care if you're 7 or 70. You should be learning from other people that have made mistakes so you don't have to make the same ones,
100%,
right?
100%, and especially in something as expensive as real estate, because the mistakes are not they're not minor. And I've seen so many people that tried to get in to the game and even just doing it locally, and a year later they weren't doing it anymore. It can be challenging. It's great. It's luckily I started when I was young, so I was very ambitious back then. I think if I started now and had to put up with some of the things I did when I was first learning, I don't think I would be doing it. So but in any case, thank goodness I started when I was 23. So
That's a good runway to learn from. Okay, so going back for a second, because you're from Calgary, why aren't you investing in Canada?
yeah, well, it's interesting because I used to do everything, like I said, in Calgary. And a buddy of mine who was from Calgary, he actually moved to Las Vegas. And so I used to go visit him. And what I noticed is every time I go there, the prices of the real estate were going up. And this is still happening, but this is way back when, probably 20 years ago or so now. So in any case, I would go visit him. And unlike a lot of people that go to Vegas, my addictions aren't gambling and drinking and partying. My addiction back then was I could not drive past an open house and not go in there and start talking to the realtors like, hey, why are they selling? What's going on in the market? Like that was my favorite thing to do back in those days. And so I was realizing that at that time, a lot of Californians were moving to Vegas to lower their cost of living. And so I closed, basically stopped doing what I was doing in Calgary. And I started to purchase homes in Vegas to sell to all these people that were moving that direction. So I'd buy them, I'd fix them. I was doing much like I do today, but instead of selling to investors as end buyers, I was selling to end buyers who wanted to live in the property. And I just realized that and once again, I don't want to generalize because the US is a big place and Canada is a big place, but in general, the laws are much more favorable for being a landlord, for example, and at least in the states that I work in. And I'm very cognizant of which states I pick to work in. The US seems to be much more entrepreneurial, like it's much more encouraged. In Canada, you're almost like penalized for being an entrepreneur. It feels like to me, it always did. And so I realized that not only can I get in for a lot lower numbers, like some of the properties I sell today are like 120, 130, 140,000. most of Canada, that won't get you a shed. So we're dealing with a whole different bunch of numbers. We're dealing with a whole bunch of better returns. And I like to invest only in places where the government's on my side. Like if I get a bad tenant who's not paying rent, I don't want them to be able to stay in my house indefinitely without paying, and the government's saying, oh, you can't kick them out. And so anyway, I just find there's certain parts of the US that are much more landlord friendly. And not all of Canada is tenant friendly, but a lot of it is. And the numbers just don't make sense anyway. So there's just a number of different reasons. I still love my country, by the way, but in terms of investing here, it makes no sense.
Yeah, and it's gotten so much worse over the last decade, I'll say. So we were accidental landlords about 10 years ago where we had a house, it wasn't selling, we wanted to buy a different one, and so we thought, "Oh, we'll just rent this one out." We did a rent to own. We knew the guy's employer who signed for him, and it was all fine and dandy for the first like 6 months until we
Uh-oh.
realized that he had kind of disappeared and wasn't paying his rent. And we didn't realize that it was even possible for him to do, but he moved all of the utilities into our names.
Oh, wow.
So by the time we realized that he was behind, a month or two on his rent, and we were, well, at least he's got the electricity still paid for because that's still on. No, he had
Wow.
completely trashed the house. It was like probably another 6 months before we could get him out of the house.
Mhm.
Tens of thousands of dollars just in damages and back rent. And we went to the landlord tenant board. It took that long just to get him out of the house. And he wasn't even there. It was that long before we could just get possession of our own house to get his stuff out. And by
Oh,
that point,
exactly.
rotted food everywhere. And I mean, we've all heard the horror stories, and this
Oh,
was
yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
one.
And yeah,
But
and it just really reinforces, some of the things that I love to teach people. Number one, you've got to pick the right market to invest in. So when I say the US, I'm not just saying buy anywhere in the US. You have to be
mhm.
very specific where you go. And then, part B is you really need good property management because uh, stuff like that is avoidable, but you have to have really good people on your team that know one, how to pick the right tenants. They also have to be keeping an eye on the property. And as soon as something like that happens, you have to get on it ASAP. You can't you can't wait months and months because, well, you found out the hard way. So I say it all the
Exactly.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hear other provinces are better. I think Alberta is one of the good ones, but it's made us completely gun shy in doing any kind of rentals again because you never know. And it's gotten so much worse that it's even more in the tenant's favor now versus the
Oh yeah. Well,
landlords.
Ontario's gotten really bad. BC is really bad.
Hmm.
Most of Canada is not great. And but like I said, even if the laws were in favor, the numbers are not. The returns are not there. And so, if we're using infinite banking and you're basically creating a loan for yourself, well, you have to pay that back. And if your property is not cash flowing, well, where are you getting that money to pay it back? I can't remember the last time I actually bought a property in Canada. It's been decades, literally. Like since I started in the US, I don't know if I've even bought one. So anyway, I'm glad that the opportunity is there south of the border because Canada's just not cutting it right now in terms of numbers.
Yeah. So in terms of like trying to get into the market, if you have someone who's just starting out and maybe they don't even know how much they should be, like how much investment should someone be prepared to make? It sounds like it's less in the US than it would be in Canada, just based on
Oh,
the housing market.
definitely. And there's some lenders, by the way, because I know a lot of Canadians say, well, how am I going to get financing in the US? And I actually have access to some lenders. They typically want, 30, 35% down, sometimes 20 or 25 if you're really lucky. And once again, we're talking about much lower price points typically. And the real answer to that is it just really it depends, not just on where you're buying and what you're buying, but also what makes the most sense, like how much you need to put down to get the property to cash flow. And sometimes it takes very, very little. And sometimes it can be a little bit creative as well. And there's ways to reduce that. And so you can leverage even further and use, for example, your infinite banking to buy more properties than you otherwise might be able to. And so usually what I do is, and because it's not one size fits all, is I'll have a conversation with somebody who's looking to do that. And I'll get them to answer a series of questions. And we'll make sure that, uh, you know, I like to reverse engineer it. I like to figure out, well, how much do you have available? How much could we potentially add to that if you don't have enough to purchase it outright using the money in your insurance? So there's a whole bunch of questions. And then, of course, I also have to make sure that, once again, they have the right entities, the right setups, because The worst thing is going and finding a great property with a good tenant and a great team. And now you have this money coming in, but then the government takes all of it because you didn't set up properly. And that does happen where you can get double taxed. There's withholding tax. There's a whole bunch of things that can happen if you don't set up properly. And so these are all the things that I take care of before we even get started. Before we even start talking about a property, we need to get all that stuff taken care of, which it doesn't take long. It's not complicated, but it needs to be discussed. And then we figure out what do the numbers look like, and then we reverse engineer it to find the right property that fits, fits a down payment and fits the whatever you qualify for.
Okay, so you basically work with people to help them get the proper structure first, make sure that they have their LLC or all of the
And by
things
the way,
that they
Canadians
need to.
should never use an LLC, at least not on its own. By the way, I'm not an
Oh,
accountant, not a
thank you.
lawyer.
Yep.
I just wanted to say that. But anyway, so don't set up an LLC, and that's why I'll have an initial conversation, and then I'll refer them to somebody who is a CPA that has the right credentials to officially okay what I said to make sure it was accurate. So.
Hmm. Okay, but even just to be able to tell them what your next steps are, I like just from my own experience, I can tell clients, you know what, this is a great tax savings by using this strategy, but you need to go to your accounting team
Of course.
and they need to set this up, or this is a great estate planning tool, but you still need to go to your tax lawyer. You still need to go to your
Exactly.
estate lawyer and make sure these things are properly
Yeah.
set
So,
up.
yeah, normally what I do is, well, of course, I tell people I'm not an accountant, not a lawyer, like I just did. And then I'll give them information based on my experience because I've had quite a few different corporations in the US and I know what has worked for me. So I'll never say this is what you should do because it's not one size fits all. I like to prepare them before they go to the accountant. Because a lot of times if you go in uneducated and you talk to somebody who sets up entities, they're going to encourage you to set up like some 5-tier system, which you don't need. And so I like to tell people, hey, this is what either A, B, or C. These are the options that you need right now. And as we help build your portfolio and it gets bigger, then at that point we can add on to it. But I find, of course, that a lot of times people get advice to over entity themselves, if that's a word, and they end up spending more on setting all this up than they need to. And so I like to educate them so they're not going in there blind. And then from there, the accountant knows that these people, well, if I sent them, the accountant's not going to do that anyway. But I think it's always good to have a little bit of education before you go in. And then obviously I don't charge for it. Whereas depending on the accountant, after a while, they will start charging you for information. So
Hmm.
I like to save my clients as much as money as possible so they can put that in the property instead of into other people's pockets.
Awesome. So, okay, so speaking about money, how do you get paid out of all this? What does that
So
structure look like?
yeah, so typically I already own these homes. And like I said, I have the benefit of doing everything in bulk and in volume. So it's kind of like if I went to Costco and I bought a case of Coca-Cola and then I owned a vending machine and I sold them one at a time, I make my profit that way. So I don't actually charge anybody anything. That's all included. And it's in my best interest for like the more money I can make my clients, the more deals they're going to do and the more we both win. And so I'm all about creating win-win scenarios. And so I'm happy. I actually geek out on this stuff. I love talking real estate. You might have noticed. Um, and so I actually look forward to doing these calls. I find it really fun. So there's no cost at all for that. And the money is built into the whole deal. So everything's in there.
Amazing. Awesome. So I know we're getting close to time, so I want to be respectful of your time. Are there any markets right now that you would say are your favorite in the US or that you see
Yeah,
kind of as an upcoming?
that's a moving target, and it really depends on the client. Um, like for cash flow, there's certain markets that I love. Then there's others that are really ripe for appreciation. They're undervalued. And I've done a lot of real estate in Atlanta, Georgia, for example. And when I first started there, which was probably 13, 14 years ago, it was a great cash flow play and it was undervalued. And I was telling people that. And so all my clients that got in back in those days have either made a lot of equity and use that money to buy more properties for their portfolio. But now it's not as great a cash flow play as it used to be. And so, but it's kind of a moving target because, in all honesty, markets change very, very quickly these days. And I almost don't like to give too much information because I don't want people to go and say, oh, well, Mike said I should invest in wherever, fill in the blank. And then they go and, 2 months from now, I might give totally different advice than I would today. So it's really hard. I can say Atlanta just because I've done it for so many years. and I still continue to do Atlanta. But in terms of more cash flow, that's like shifting. We're seeing a lot of changes in the US. People tend to move around a lot more. And
Mm,
so in general, I like to invest in places where there's a lot of population growth, a lot of, and people will move to look for jobs. Whereas in Canada, we tend to stay put a lot more. And so the goal is to be in the path of progress and to go to places where other people are moving to, but other investors haven't caught on yet that that's happening, because it's really the investors that drive up a lot of these markets. Like when kind of news gets out that everybody's moving to such and such a place, like you see an announcement saying Amazon is building a new $1 billion headquarters in such and such a city, every investor heads there, they drive up the prices. And if you didn't get in early, you already missed the opportunity. So the object of the game is to, I talk to people about real estate all day, every day. And so I know a lot of things that are potentially going on in places that haven't made the news yet. And so it's being in the path of progress before everybody else gets there. And so
mm,
once again, that changes on a daily basis. So
okay. Are there any, I don't know if you can tell me this either because I imagine this changes too, but are there states that are consistently more friendly for investors?
yes,
Or
100%.
especially towards Canadians, maybe?
Yeah, well, not necessarily Canadians. We don't really have a problem investing anywhere. But if you were to buy, for example, in California, New York, New Jersey, any of those places are very horrible for landlords. They're very, very tenant friendly. So I avoid those. One of the reasons why I love Atlanta, and I'll use that as an example again, is Georgia is extremely landlord friendly. And so that doesn't mean that we go and treat our tenants like crap, because we can. These are the people that make your investing possible. So we treat them very, very well. But if they're not paying or they're destroying the property, I can generally get rid of a bad tenant in a couple of weeks. In California, it would literally, a tenant in a lot of these markets where it's very, very tenant friendly, you see a lot of professional tenants who have learned that they're almost like lawyers, but on the opposite side, where it's like they've learned every way that they can possibly take advantage of a landlord and not get kicked out. They know the law so well. They would have stayed in school instead. They wouldn't have to do that.
Right?
But so you have to be really careful. But yeah, so George is one really good example, and it's also very, very business friendly. And so, speaking of being in the path of progress, they charge very low taxes to corporations, knowing that these corporations are going to create a lot of jobs, and the government can tax all the employees. And so, knowing that as a landlord, knowing that my tenants are, there's a lot of job opportunities, and if, for example, if you look at Atlanta, it's head office to Turner Broadcasting, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, the list goes on and on and on. But more importantly than having a bunch of head offices, they're all in different industries. And so what that means is if Coca-Cola were to go out of business tomorrow, which I doubt is going to happen, but if it did, these people could go work somewhere else. And so that's a way of saying that the government's very business friendly. So a lot of businesses want to be there. And in terms of being able to collect rent, if your tenants were to get laid off, they're going to be able to find another job relatively soon in most cases, if they're actually looking. And so you want to be in places where once again the government's very, very not just friendly for landlords, but also creating jobs and being progressive and attracting more people there. And that's the path of progress. Wherever people are headed, that's where you want to be. You just want to be there before they get there.
Hmm. So really, really does involve keeping your hands on a lot of different moving parts and just
There
knowing
are so
all these
many, and
things.
that's why I was in the trenches for many, many years. These days I don't really work that hard anymore. As you know, I travel full time, so but I have teams that are very, very ingrained in the markets, and they're very well connected to the kind of movers and shakers in the real estate industry in the different cities that I work in. And so we're always researching and trying to stay on top of things, because, and especially these days, things are changing so quickly. So you have to stay on top of it.
Yes. All right. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time, but is there anything that you want to add, maybe for the viewers, if there's any advice that you would want to give them? We'll, of course, leave your information down below.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that real estate's been so good to me over the years, and I've been doing it now for what, 37 years. I think that makes me officially very old. But in any case, I see a lot of people, and they make mistakes, and they end up out it. They get in, maybe they buy their first rental property, and then I have people all the time. If I'm speaking at an event, people come up after and go, "How can you have so many properties? Like, how do you still like how, the stress level? How are you still alive?" Because a lot of times people have one or two properties and they spend way more time on those one or two properties than I do on all my properties, and that's because I have proper teams in place and they're trying to manage it themselves. And of course, tenants don't really like to pay rent if they don't have to. Um, so a lot of times people end up out of the industry way too soon. And if they would have been able to just hang in there long enough, uh, they could have reaped the rewards. And that really comes down to having the right people, as you mentioned, the right mentors on your team. Trying to figure out yourself is definitely possible, but it's a much slower path. And in the long run, in most cases, it's going to end up a lot more expensive because of the mistakes. So um, I tell people, 100% of people should be invested in real estate, but very few people should actually be real estate investors where they're on the front lines and doing, the stuff every day. And I don't even do this stuff anymore every day. But like I said, if I didn't start when I was young, I probably would have given up. So stick with it, get in, stick with it, but get the right information, get the right people on your side, and it'll go a lot more smoothly for you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I love talking with you. I'm sure we'll chat again. Such great information. But if anybody wants to get in contact with Mike, we'll leave all of his information down in the description.
Thanks so much,
Awesome.
Krista.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you so much for joining. If you found this episode helpful, please give it a like and hit subscribe. And when you're ready to take the next steps, click the link in the description to access my free resources and to book a call to start. Your future self will thank you. Until next time, live free.